Oh, tell us a bit about your background.
I'm a London lad. I was born in London, brought up in London. I come from a broken home. I was in children's homes at a very young age, and like so many other kids on the streets of London, you grow up through like a kind of system, through children's homes, through to detention centres, ball stalls, prison sentence, YP sentence, just basically running a bit wild, you know, when you haven't got parents and no one to look up to, no one that... You're not really worried if you get into trouble because there's no one there you're really hurting or upsetting.
Who did you live with then?
I was just in children's homes. I was brought up in care in children's homes. I've never met my father to this day. But I went through life and I just turned to crime at a very young age. All the lads used to run away from children's homes, constantly running away and getting into trouble. But I was so young, I was too young to be prosecuted, so all they could really do was bring me back to another children's homes, which was more of a lock-up centre, stop you from running away. So I grew up in this environment from the age of 15, 16. Like I said, I was in ball stalls. Got into my teenage years, I got into more worse crime, if you like, better way of saying it. I got higher up the ladder, as they say. And I just carried on my life of crime, and I never had any sort of religious upbringing, never ever went to church, never really heard of Jesus, or, I mean, I've heard the name, but I didn't relate it to anything, it didn't mean anything to me. And from the age of 20, by the age of 20, I'd spent quite a few years in jail. I'd turned to drugs, started to sell drugs, started to get into drugs in quite a heavy way. I mean, I always smoked cannabis at a very young age, you know, and from cannabis it led to different drugs and harder drugs. And in my late 20s, I started to use heroin. And I started to use heroin in a very serious way. I became a very bad addict, you know. And my life just took a total downhill spiral, as it does all heroin addicts. Your life just goes from one extreme to the other. And I actually overdosed once on heroin. I was actually dead for 4 seconds and brought back to life. So really, I'm lucky in that sense to even be sitting here today to tell you this story. I was trying to think how old I was, and the first kind of experience that I ever had with God or anything was when I was in prison. And there was a guy in prison I knew, Mickey, I'll say his name, Mickey Andrews, because I've never seen that guy to this day, and I really would love to see Mick again. And he was one of them guys brought up similar to myself, and it was very hard man, you know, very violent man, very hard man. And the whole wing in the prison I was in was pretty feared of Mickey, you know, because he was a bit of a nutcase, as one of a better way of saying it. And one morning he came out of his cell, and he claimed to see that Jesus had appeared to him in his cell and showed him the holes in it. But none of us ever believed him, do you know what I mean? And we all thought he was trying to work his ticket to get out of the prison, you know, because he'd lost so much time in there through violence. And when he was finally released, Mickey used to send me tapes for about 2 years. And then I realised that this guy had obviously experienced something, because he continued it when he left the prison. But I didn't take that much notice of it. And I carried on with my life of crime and so on, and the drugs. And a friend of mine, Mark King, I'd known for quite a lot of years. He used to be into a little bit of crime with me in the beginning. He became a Christian. And he used to come and tell me about Christ and Jesus and who he was and what it meant to him and that. But it wasn't for me. I used to say to Mark, it's okay for you, but it's not for me, mate, you know. I'm not really into any of that, you know. Then he asked me to come to a camp, faith camp it was, in Peterborough. And again I refused, and he kept coming around, he kept saying to me, you need to come to this camp. God spoke to me and he's told me you need to be to this camp. And at the time I was very heavily into the heroin. I had a terrible heroin addiction. I mean, I was spending between 100 and 150 pounds a day just to hold my addiction together, you know.
How did you get, ask how that money?
It was just pure criminal activities, you know. It was just pure life of crime. And being brought up from where I'd been brought up from, I knew all the criminals. I was an accepted criminal, you know, trusted, if you like, in the sense of criminals, you know, as it goes. So the money wasn't too much of a problem, you know. I was earning quite a lot of money. And he came to me 2 days prior to this faith camp meeting actually happening, and he said to me, you really need to come, Paul, please come. And at the time, I'd had a big row with my girlfriend at the time, and it was convenient for me to go, because the camp was a week-long, 7-day-long camp. So I thought I'll go, just to get away from the argument I was having with the living girlfriend I was with at the time. So I went to this camp. I mean, there's 3,000 to 4,000 people at this camp, but I've never been to any sort of Christian meeting or church or anything like that for my life. And I walked into the meeting hall and they was all there and people were on the floor and hands in the air, and I actually thought they was all nuts, you know what I mean? I was looking at it and I thought, whoa, you know, I thought, well, I'll leave the meetings alone, do you know what I mean? And I'll just stay near the tent and just have a, like, you know, it's just a barbecue sort of thing and relax. So it was on the Wednesday, they had a preacher come over from Africa, Wilfred Lai his name was, and Mark said to me, you need to come to this seminar tonight, he's talking about something you need to hear, you know? So, okay, just to pacify Mark, you know? So I went into the seminar and we sat there. And towards the end of his preaching, he turned around and he said, the Spirit of God is speaking to me and is telling me there's people in this auditorium that are struggling with drugs. And if they come forward now, God will release them. I mean, Mark sort of gave me a nudge, you know, and I said, no, Mark, I said, I don't want to go forward, you know, I don't want to do anything like that. And then loads of people went forward, about 120, there was hundreds of people went forward, and then he was praying on people. Then he just stopped this pastor and he said, no, God just spoke to me again. There's people in here that are really struggling, people in here that have actually died on drugs, and they need to come forward if they want to be set free. And that really hit home, you know, to me. So I thought, well, I tried everything else, you know, and I mean, I'd been through 2 rehabs in my time, you know, and managed to get myself clean, managed to come out and straight basically back onto the drugs, you know. I went straight back into the life of crime, straight back into the drug scene. So, and then I thought, well, I tried everything else, you know, I might as well try this. There's no harm in trying. So I went forward and I stood there and I remember looking down and this guy, because I say there was quite a few people that went forward, he was quite a distance away from me. So I remember shutting my eyes and I think this is quite an important issue actually, because what I actually did that moment was I actually opened my heart, because I remember closing my eyes and saying, God, if you really are real, please help me, do you know what I mean? Because I'd already died, do you know what I mean? And I knew that I wouldn't have lasted long, you know, and I could not take that desire for heroin. I could stop heroin, I'd done it in the rehabs, but I could not get rid of that desire for it. So I really prayed. And I opened my eyes and this guy was there. And Mark told me after he'd come forward with me as a bit of support that he'd skipped about 40, 50 people and came directly to me, you know. So this guy laid his hands on me and he prayed for me. And no lightning, nothing at that particular second, you know, and he sort of prayed for me. And I remember walking out of the auditorium and I really felt something was different in there. I didn't know what it was, but I just felt something was different. I couldn't put my finger on what it was. And I was staying in a little one-man tent and on the campsite on my own. And I remember going into the tent and I had a little candle. And I was sitting, I was thinking, that was really strange. I was just trying to get it in my mind what actually happened, because I couldn't put my finger on why I felt so different, you know. And I remember blowing this candle out in this tent, and the second I blew this candle out, a presence came all around me in the tent. And when I say a presence, I actually felt it, because I sat up. My first reaction was to get this candle lit again, you know, because it was quite frightening, I don't mind admitting it. And as I sat up, I actually felt the pressure of a presence, you know. And I remember fumbling for the matches, and the next thing I know, now I know what happened. I was took in the spirit, because the next thing I know, I was surrounded by this light, you know. And the weirdest thing that I've ever experienced in my Christian walk, and I've never experienced it since, was when I was in the spirit, it was as if I knew everything. And it's as if I'd always known it. It was really, really strange. And it was so real, you know, and it wasn't like someone was talking to me, saying, this is God, this is you. It was, I knew. And I'd always known, you know, I know from my experience, when people's spirits leave their body, when they finally die, they will be in a place where they know, and they've always have known. It's just been taken away from them in the body, if you understand. But once you're out of the body, your spirit belongs to God, it knows, you know, and that's what happened to me in that tent. And the last thing that, like I say, voice that I was told was, next move I want you to do is be baptised, Paul, and I will meet you at baptism. That was the last thing I heard. And then it stopped as quick as it started.